In 2025, the world shipped 611 million wearables. The FDA cleared 215 sensor-based clinical devices in the same year. So for every clinically validated medical sensor, the market sold 8.8 million consumer devices, all of them generating signals, almost none of these signals reaching a clinician. That's the gap. I'm Piotr Zając, HealthTech Director at Monterail, 14 years inside regulated health software, 14 years watching companies hit the same wall. Today we go into the infrastructure. My guest is Saine, founder and CEO of AnyBio, the compliant runway between consumer biosignal and clinical care. Steven, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the first one, Steven, and let me put the picture in front of you. I said at the beginning that 611 million wearables shipped last year, and modern devices capture 8 to 10 different biosignal families. Let's say heart rate, ECG, PPG, oxygen, glucose, motion, sometimes EEG. And a signal high resolution ECG stream runs about a gigabyte per user per day, and now multiply that by hundreds of millions of users. And yet every scoping review I've read concluded the same thing. Only a fraction of that data ever reaches a clinician in a useful way. So is the wearable chaos a real clinical problem, or is it's a vendor narrative, the kind of thing infrastructure companies have to sell and invent into a market that isn't actually demanding what they're selling?
Yeah, no, I think this is a good framing, because this category is so hot right now that all you hear about is the amount of usefulness that is right there at our fingertips, and yet we hear things like it never reaches care. And I think when I sort of step back and think about just the crux of it is really signal to noise, right? How do we make sense of the sea of information that's out there that's flowing? And really and truly, like, our world already deals with this problem in a different way. So if you think about just the amount of radio waves, cellular waves, RF waves that are just flowing around us at all times, the thing that makes it super valuable is actually a tuner, an FM radio tuner that can go to a specific wavelength, to a specific frequency, and find a coherent signal that then delivers something that's being broadcast that we can make meaning from. And I think the same thing is probably true in this wearable data, right? There's a sea of data flowing right now, and we're trying to actually find the tuner that will tune to a frequency that's meaningful. And I think that's what we're in search of, myself included, is trying to help arrive at those frequencies that are meaningful, and then use those, which may be in some ways rare in the sea that we find them, but then they're super valuable and they save lives and they move care. And I think that's what we're trying to bridge the gap on, is how do we go from the sea to the things that are really important.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned the frequency and the chaos and the data. We all know about overload, cognitive overload, burnout with clinicians. So is physician as builder that you're claiming on the website a rift, or are you pouring fuel on a fire that's already burning the people you're trying to empower?
I think you're right that, physicians are overworked. You hear stats around we're going to have a shortage of physicians, right? This is getting better if you look at some statistics. I don't think the idea is that all doctors are going to turn into programmers, or that they're going to spend their weekends building anything. I don't think that's what we're kind of talking about. What we're seeing, and my gut is telling me, is that there are always in any industry experts that can't lay down an idea, something that's burning in them. It's just innovators everywhere, right? It's something that keeps them up at night, and they have the expertise to deliver it. But in healthcare, there's a big wall, number one. And so with the AI tools and where we're seeing like this vibe coding phenomenon go is just that the gap between the expert with the idea and being able to deliver something that can be tested and then eventually deployed, that has never been a smaller gap. What we're trying to do is just think about now that they're empowered, what is possible. But in healthcare, there are guardrails that need to be in place, and that's where infrastructure really comes into play.
I really like your answer because, like with vibe coding that you mentioned, not all of the entrepreneurs and CEOs will vibe code, right? And I think it's the same with clinicians. And AnyBio is an amazing tool that can be used by concierge doctors, people who work really closely with their patients on programs, on plans, and on some improvements like the lowering the blood pressure or improving the cardiovascular health or sleep or digestion, right? This is only the one of the examples, but they can create a program and work with their patients and use AnyBio to filter the noise and focus only on the most important signals.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're ultimately trying to do is help those that have that expertise land it and test it and get it deployed in a regulated, governed way that's safe all the way through. But that timeline has never been shorter because of the technology we have today.
I wish it can turn into like a national or international movement of experimenting with the technology and using that technology to work very closely with the patient. But I have a statement I want you to defend or attack. In 2026, building biosignal infrastructure yourself is a strategic mistake. Same texture. I can get SoC to Type 2 built for between $15,000 and $150,000 depending on scope. Validic already powers the largest centralized remote patient monitoring program in the US. Over 300,000 patients, I read. The infrastructure exists, so when AnyBio quotes a $250K to $1 million, 12 to 18 months rebuild, is that the real cost? Or is that a number that exists to justify your existence?
No, I think so. As far as the number goes, we think about just the head count to satisfy, let's say, your SOC 2 compliance. Sure, you can get an auditor to audit your product for, like you said, 15, maybe to 25K. I think that probably scales up with the size of the organization that's trying to achieve the SOC 2 certification because it sort of sucks everything in the org into that compliance structure. Yeah, I think smaller orgs can probably get there, but like minimum is probably 250K to think about landing all of it. And the other part of that should be called out is that it's not a one-time stamp. It's actually a treadmill that you continue to run on because you continue to prove that you're compliant. And so the cost is really like never ending as long as you want to maintain that compliance posture. When we look at infrastructure, we think of that posture as something that really shouldn't be built in 2026 unless how your data flows, it's part of the platform, which is your moat. In those cases, there's always going to be a company where that is part of their special sauce, and they should 100% build and own their own infrastructure, maintain the compliance year after year, and continually stand that up. So it's not a blanket statement. Nobody should be owning their infrastructure today. But I do think that there are innovations and device companies and algorithm companies and care pathway companies that in the end, when it comes to moving biosignals around and just touching that data means you need to be compliant in a certain way and would put you on a treadmill that your entire organization would need to maintain, and you pay for those year after year. You have a tech team that has some level of expertise to maintain that governance, to maintain that auditability, and et cetera. That cost becomes something that, in my mind, is something that you should buy and not necessarily build internally.
Very good point. And with limited resources, when we have a team, the team should focus on what they really care about, right? About, for example, when they have only like the Stanford a PhD working on the innovation, they don't have to worry about the infrastructure. They can delegate that to AnyBio or the company like AnyBio to let them fully focus, laser focus on the outcome for the patient, the medical outcome, right? So this is the burden that that they don't have to have. So my last question, and it's about attention. I see in your own positioning, and AnyBio's documentation is as explicitly tuned for AI coding agents. And your homepage says, quote, prompt cursor, Cloud Code, or Lovable. So your business model depends on developers using AI to write healthcare code. And now, industry reports estimate around 40 to 45% of AI-generated code contain at least one security issue. GitHub Copilot is not covered by Microsoft's BAA. And in 2024, healthcare logged 725 breaches affecting, crazy number, 275 million records. AnyBio is a third-party business associate. So how do you think about your responsibility at the platform that says, yes, prompt your agent, ship it in a week, when if it fails, you're the next Change Healthcare headline? And where do you draw the line between giving people access and accelerating a safety nightmare?
Yeah, I think what we're encouraging folks to do with the tools they have today is build the use cases that prove there's value, almost to that prototype level, to that pilot level, to something that can be tested. But our responsibility is to essentially allow them to do that in a safe way. And I think at the end of the day, in healthcare, everything needs to be safe and governed and play by the rules. That's why the regulation is there. That's why we've stood up and continue to defend like the compliance posture that we hold. And so for us, we're not really trying to say vibe code something sloppy and get it fast into care. The responsibility for infrastructure is for them to be able to do that in a safe way. And so that's sort of our onus. From my background of building systems, regulated data systems for 25 plus years, I actually have a lot of fun designing these systems to play by those rules, to provide those safe rails. From my perspective, it's just that every idea shouldn't hold that burden. I believe that we can move innovation forward. And I know it's a little bit cliche to say we want to power the next generation of innovation in digital health, but it's that idea that we've leveled up what it is that should be just available to you, and it should continue to be safe, but allow innovators who come to me and say, like, what do you mean compliance? What does that mean when I want to move this biosignal into my EHR, or I want to measure this on a patient and I want to be able to see it in my chart? They don't connect the dots on everything that needs to happen to make that data safe. They just have that clinical idea that can be impactful to their patients. And that's what they're laser focused on. And so for infrastructure, I think our responsibility is to do that almost so that they don't have to think about it. And all the while, we have the stamps of approval, of compliance and safety and governance that we've signed up to hold.
Thank you. I think it's a really good answer. And thank you for the conversation and for sharing your perspective. It was really good to learn more about AnyBio and your perspective on the compliance side, on the security side, and the responsibility. As we both know, that there are three phases. There is a storming, forming, and performing phase. And with all of the vibe coding and AI, I believe we are in storming phase, and maybe you're entering the forming phase soon. But AnyBio definitely helps people to navigate through that maze and AI.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.